Welcome to Island Baptist Church. Dr. Randy Wallace's lesson today is titled Visible Love. We are studying Matthew chapter 5, verses 43 through 44, and 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verses 1 through 13.
I got to explain to you how I came to be here. Greg Judd and I go back many years to when we were youth ministers straight out of college. The Texas Baptists do a big thing called Super Summer, and it's like a statewide youth camp, and Greg was staffing that, and I was staffing that, and we were on a team together, and that's how far back Greg and I go. Now, I want you to know that for years, my wife and I, this is Patty, stand up. She is my first and last love, okay? She's as good as it gets, and we've been together 38 years. So through our whole married life and previously to that, tourists come to the island. And so she, as a little girl, came to the island, and she had an aunt that worked here on the island through her whole career, and her family would come down to the island, so it was a special place for her. I got to know the island as a youth minister. We came down and worked through this very church and did backyard Bible clubs and vacation Bible school in this building and over in Port Isabel. And we did that like 3 different summers. And Bruce Webb was the pastor then. And the first year we did it was the pastor before him, and I just can't remember his name. But then Bruce, who's a former pastor here, and I have been just career ministry friends. When he left Island Baptist, he went to Jacksonville, and I was in the same county with him, and we were both trying to revolutionize or revive old first churches, and God did a good ministry there, and we're buddies. He had little girls, I had little boys. I thought they would get married, but they didn't. But anyway, they got married, just not to each other. So I called Greg, and I said, Bill Waddell and I were on committees together through Texas Baptist, so I've got a history with the leadership of this church, but I've never been asked to preach here. And my feelings aren't hurt because usually I'm down here as a tourist. But, I'd let Bill know a few days ahead, hey, I'm going to be down for the weekend if you need me, or my sons are musicians, but he just never took the bait. That's fine. I don't mind. Because there's danger in having a guest preacher. You've got to know this. If he's really good, then the people kind of, sense an inadequacy in you. If he's really bad, when Greg comes back, you'll complain to him. So my job today is to preach about a B-. Okay? Just good enough. All right? And I just got to tell y'all, that is my goal today, just to be good enough not to cause trouble for Greg. He texted me last night. He said, I'm praying for you. And I said, take the night off. You're on vacation. I said, I'm like the babysitter. You left me the pediatrician's name and the little old lady next door. And I said, I'm going to go up to the church and I'm going to let them eat chocolate cake for dinner. We're going to watch some scary movies, but it'll be okay when you come back. It'll be all right. We've got this. So I called Greg and I said, listen, you're a new pastor and it's different than any other role that you've ever had. He's a career minister, but he hasn't been the lead pastor, to my knowledge, ever. I said, I know you can do it. I know your heart. It's the same heart that you've given to those people. But I got to tell you this. When you want to go out of town, it's a burden because your wife picks a date, someplace you want to go, and you start calling around trying to find a supply preacher. Now, I know that in-house there's some guys that would do it, but they might not be good enough, right? And so you're like, so you call around, well, this good supply preacher that's over in the county somewhere, he's already booked for another day. He says, I'm sorry, I can't help you. I would do it, but da-da-da-da. I said, Greg, I want to give you one. I said, my church will let me be out of my pulpit about a Sunday a year to go anywhere else that I want to. Now, I get vacation days, but I'm not on vacation. I'm down here to preach, right? I'm a preaching away today. And I've got preachers in my church. I've got retired chaplains. We're a military town. I've got retired preachers. I've got retired missionaries. And they're all good enough. But because I'm on a mission from God to encourage, I asked a university student who has preached some Disciple Now weekends from Baylor University to preach at my church today. So he's in the big leagues. This is his chance, right? So I've thrown him a little scrap for him to have a day to be encouraged by my church. God got an awesome church, and he'll be so encouraged by preaching at a full house over at the First Baptist Church in Killeen. Greg's going to be encouraged because he and his wife are away and they know that I got this. And y'all are going to be encouraged because I'm on a mission from God to encourage people. And so this whole thing comes together. Now, how do I get encouraged? I'm like, well, I get to walk on the beach with my wife for 3 days. So we came down Thursday. Yeah, you know the punchline, all right? Yeah. We actually went to the beach yesterday. I put the truck in 4-wheel drive and we drove down there, right? We got out and picked up a seashell. It's like, okay, we're done. We're out of here. But anyway, that's the joke's on me when it comes to that. And God does have a sense of humor, and he laughs when I don't know. Maybe he laughs to keep from crying. Hey, if you've got a Bible with you today, I'm going to be in a very familiar passage, 1 Corinthians chapter 13. It's possible that you had this read in your wedding ceremony, or that you've heard it read in wedding ceremonies. It's a very familiar wedding passage, but I want to tell you that it is not a word about romantic love. This sort of love is a Christ love that is on display to us perfectly only in the person of Jesus Christ. And today I want to speak about the subject of visible love. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is that if you really think that you got this one covered, and by the way, love is a word that should belong to the church. Christians should do love better than anybody else. And the word out front, island, we know why it's island. Baptist should mean love. But to the outside world, it probably means something dry and probably irrelevant. And the word church is... They ask people that don't go to church if they ever tried to church, and about half of them that don't go to church tried church. Well, if you said if you ever tried love, the people still like that, right? So somehow we lost the ownership in Christianity of love. Now, Jesus said it to us like this. So you've heard it said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. I dare say that most of us here today came with somebody that we love. You may be here by yourself, and we love you, but how many of y'all came with somebody? Wave at me. Yeah, and love between y'all is not toxic, or you wouldn't come to church with them, right? You say, I'd rather go by myself than sit by him for an hour, right? I don't even like him. This love phenomenon between people that we like is easy, and people all over the world do this. Hindus do this. Muslims do this. People without any religion, they get the familiar love. But Jesus turned it on his head when he said, it's not just loving your neighbor. Praying for your enemies. Now, first of all, I'm going to say that we ought to live our lives in such a way that we don't have enemies. Right? But you didn't pick that daughter-in-law that doesn't like you. Okay? No amens, just a good laugh. All right then. But Christ, in a time of revolution, was murdered by his enemies. Understanding that this week there was a church in a conflicted area where 20 Christians, their heads were cut off. And you have to wonder, as they were dying, if they were praying for those who persecuted them. Jesus this is a really high bar to set. This doesn't just say, be nice. This is way past be nice. And so then as we step into the church and its mandate for what this love looks like, if you look into 1 Corinthians 13, Paul's been talking about spiritual gifts, and he's talking to the church. This is an in the building sort of a conversation. And I'm going to read this, and I hope I remember to flip the screen at the right time. At my church, I've got a grown-up that flips the screen for me, so I just go wild, and they try to keep up. 1 Corinthians 13. If I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but I have not love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy, and I can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have a faith that can move mountains, but I have not love, I'm nothing. If I give all the lasagna in the county, if I give all I possess to the poor and surrender my body to the flames, but I have not love, I gain nothing. I'm trying to keep up. All right, after 5. Love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud. It is not rude, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices in the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails, but where there are prophecies, they will cease, and where there are tongues, they'll be stilled. Where there is knowledge, it'll pass away. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part. But when perfection comes, the imperfect disappears. When I was a child, I talked like a child, I thought like a child, I reasoned like a child. But when I became a man, I put childish ways behind me. And now we see but a poor reflection as in a mirror, but then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. Now these three remain, faith, hope, and love, but the greatest of these is love. As I read through this passage, I consider the visible aspect of religion. It must be a church, it has a steeple, right? You can recognize that. And organized religion, oh, it's Sunday morning, that's why the cars are there. Drive by a church on Tuesday and the parking lot's full, you think, what? Somebody must have died, right? It's just, okay, what's going on over there? Weeknight, they're all confused. What's going on over there? I say that because a lot of our Christianity is formulated in our mind into a religious activity. And religious activities are fine. I don't have a problem with religious activities. Go to the Bible study. Go to the prayer meeting. Come to the worship. But within that, imagine this if you would. Without love. Meetings without love. A church without love. A Lord's Supper, a baptism without love. If you think through that, and he's saying this out loud, he wrote this to the church because the church back then had a tendency to be dysfunctional and to do the right things with the wrong heart because we're still what? We're legalistic. We're do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. And could you keep all 10 commandments without love? Think it through. You probably could. And to contemplate the exotic gifts, the ones that were most celebrated, prophecy and mysteries and faith that moves mountains. But you have not love. He said, it's useless. Now, I'm not saying stop doing the right things, but you got to do the right things with the right heart. Are you with me? I got to tell y'all a story. Growing up, I was the eighth of 9 children. There were times I did not even know it was my birthday on my birthday because I've got a brother that's 6 days older, and some days between my birthday and his birthday, Mom would make a cake. She always made a German chocolate cake. I don't know if it was my favorite. It was her favorite, I guess. All right. Nowadays, for my birthday, my wife knows there's one thing I want. I want her to make me a German chocolate cake. And I don't want the frosting out of a can. I want the frosting like she crashed the pecans by herself. She made the coconut. You know what I'm saying? And by the way, I married her for her looks, not for her cooking, okay? I want y'all to know that, all right? But she can make a premier cake, all right? She says, where's my encouragement today? Yeah. Long, quiet drive back home. All right. She was mad at me on my birthday for good reason. I won't go into all the details, all right? Okay, I invited some people over for the evening for her to entertain that she didn't like. Okay, so anyway. So she made me a German chocolate cake for my birthday, but I knew I was in trouble because it had canned icing. That was her little gotcha. Yeah, they're celebrating. There was no love in that cake. She made the cake. There was no love in the cake. And so you give your offering, you sing your song, you come to the meeting. Is there any love in it? I ask this question. Who's the best Christian you can think of? Think real hard. Who's the best Christian you can think of? Maybe it's one of your parents, maybe it's one of your uncles, maybe it's one of your aunts, maybe it's the person who led you to the Lord, maybe it's the deacon you grew up under, maybe it's a Sunday school teacher, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And I ask the question, why do you think that? Is it because they went to a lot of meetings? Was it because they were baptized 9 times? No. If you think really well of someone's faith, it's probably because somewhere in the real world, they engaged you. Maybe they looked past an offense and forgave you. Maybe they saw something in you didn't see for yourself. You with me? I went to a funeral. I wasn't even asked to preside at this funeral service, but it was one of my ushers at the church who's just kind of in the fringe involvement of our church. And his mom passed away, and I went to the funeral just kind of as an act of kindness towards him to say, hey, I don't have to be the preacher at the funeral. I went. There wasn't a preacher at the service. 9 different women got up and spoke about his mother. And in a military town, each of them had the same story. When I moved here, I didn't know anybody. And she said, can I be your friend? She was a little older and her kids were raised, but she would get with these young women who were overwhelmed because, here they are, military, they got a couple little babies, husband sent off to Iraq somewhere, and they're stranded all alone. And she knew what it felt like to be all alone. She never taught a Bible study that I'm aware of. She didn't even go to church a lot. But 9 women at her funeral got up and called her my best friend, my surrogate mother, the one who made a difference. And you can't program that at your church. We're not going to have a friendship committee, a love committee. Now, stay with me if you would. Visible religion, right? But then the second thought that I have past this visible religion is visible love. And visible religion and visible love don't look the same. So visible religion, one of my young disciples, he was in elementary, he was hanging out with my sons. In his junior high years, he had faith questions. He's very intelligent. High school, he felt a call to ministry. We licensed him in ministry. We sent him off to Baylor University to become a minister. He studied ministerial tract at Baylor University. That's our Texas Baptist premier school. And now he's an Anglican priest. I'm like, yeah, where did that happen? Well, in college, he started hanging out at the Anglican church, and he felt a connection. It wasn't a theological connection. Jesus here, Jesus there. It's you got one Jesus, but he felt a connection with the organic nature of their congregation. And when I went to his service, boy, was it religious. Man, he got a robe, and a guy in a funny hat got up there with incense. They did the whole deal. And then they served us communion. And I went down here to take communion, and he laid that little wafer on my tongue. This boy that I raised in his religious garb. And then he put that cup up to my lips, and I gagged. I just wasn't expecting it. I've tasted wine before, just not at church. It caught me off guard. It's like, visible religion. Okay, the priest wears a collar. The visible, but visible love might look like a pan of cinnamon rolls. Now, in this passage, it says, stay with me. When I was a child, I talked like a child, I thought like a child, I reasoned like a child. Can I insert a different word? When I was a child, I loved like a child. My love thought was like a child. My love reasoning was like a child, an immature love. Y'all know that one? Them young people getting married, they're not old enough. Oh, it's so immature. The paint's not dry yet. Give it time. What do we want? We want a maturation. Visible love. Love never fails. Again, this bar is very high, right? We've all failed somebody, even the ones that we love. Where there's prophecies, they'll cease. Where there are tongues, they'll be stilled. Where there's knowledge, it'll pass away. We only know in part. But when perfection comes, the imperfect disappears. Visible love. Let me ask you a question. When is your love on display? I dare say some of you are taking for granted. You say, every meal I cook, every paycheck I earn, everything I've done for this family. What's that sometimes? Sometimes it's the religious activity without the homemade icing on the cake. Somehow maybe bitterness crept in, unappreciation, tiredness, resentment, and you just did the grind. And you say it's out of love, but those around you might not have even tasted that flavor in a very long time. Never mind your enemies. When would your enemies know your love? Visible love. Christ calls us to show a visible love. And then third, visible excellence. Look at 13. And now these three remain, faith, hope, and love, but the greatest of these is love. So I'm in a military town, and we're the First Baptist Church, and I have people in my church like elected officials and the school superintendent, people that they wear a necktie to church, and they expect us all to be proper. So we're the proper First Baptist Church. Always have military people come through. They visit with us. Some of them join with us. Some of the greatest privilege I have is having that ministry and getting to know some of those great people. So I'm on the platform, and in the back, and there is a full crowd, in the back of the room, in the middle of a sermon, I noticed that people are moving off the back row. Now, when people move off the back row, that's not normal at my church, right? That's the premium seating. It's just barely here, right? You couldn't pay money to get them to sit on the front row, but the back row, that's easy. And the usher came in, and there was a little something going on back there, but they took care of it after the service. I went to one of my ushers. I said, what happened? He said, oh, you got to hear this one. There was a family of three, a husband and a wife, young military, and the mother-in-law that had moved to Killeen with them. They hadn't gotten into the military housing yet. All their belongings were in the car. It was cold outside. They didn't want their pet to get cold. So she had put her pet underneath her sweater. And during the service, the pet had crawled around on her shoulder and was peeking out through her hair. It was a pet iguana. Now tell me, you're at church, the First Baptist Church, and there's an iguana looking at you about 2 feet away. I think you would move a little also. So our city mayor at the time was an usher, not a deacon, an usher. Because, politics, you can't have all that in your church leadership. And so Fred's a very good man and would make a good deacon, but he's just never been asked. I don't know why he's hung on that hook instead of that hook. I can't figure it out. All right. Fred's the usher. He goes to Tony, the deacon, and he says, deacon trumps usher. Deal with it. And Tony goes to this lady. He says, ma'am, you think all the things you could say that would have been accurate. We don't do that here. Y'all going to have to leave. Come back on a better day. You're disturbing people's worship. He goes to her and he says, ma'am, could I care for your iguana in this side room? We had a little prayer room off the corner so that you could worship without distraction. And she said, yes, please. And Tony watched an iguana at church, and that's what love looked like that day. It was a good day. Now the family assimilated into our church, and when the young couple PCS to Europe, the mother-in-law stayed with us, Susan. She was an odd character. She rode a Harley-Davidson motorcycle, and she rode it to church. And she wore the black chaps to go with it. And she says, I don't know why the women in the church aren't accepting of me. And I said, well, Susan, let's just face it. You're a little different. But I said, when you love people, then we'll have more people that are a little bit different. And you look up and you got some traction. and a whole new group of people who thought they were shut out and left out, but they encountered some love. Isn't that neat? Just by you being you could be a part of somebody else sensing acceptance. And I think probably acceptance is a gateway to love. Now, I want to kick in here. I don't see a lot of young people, but I want to say this. Sometimes young people don't feel like they can set the tone in the home, but I guarantee you that a problematic child can set the tone for rebellion and anger in the home. Child that would be willing to do their chores without argument or resistance, to show love and respect for their parents, as is commanded in one of the 10 Commandments, can set a tone for love. A big brother that goes and helps little brother clean up his room. A big sister that loans a sweater to little sister just because, it looks good on her. Kindness in the home can be beautifully displayed through children who don't have to do it. You didn't even have to be born. And here this Christianity is being forced down your throat, and I don't have to, and I don't have to, and I don't have to, can set a very negative tone within the family. But children that choose to display love, think about Jesus, King of Kings, Lord of Lords, the most powerful entity who've ever walked the earth, washing the feet of the disciples. And to me, when you think about what love looks like, if you can get in the proximity of someone that you could wash their feet, which these days might mean like wash their dirty dishes in the home, right? Doing their laundry, or if you can, washing their feet. I'm going to tell you what, if you ever get close enough to your enemy that you can wash their feet, they will not look at you the same again because you did something for them. And a person who's hostile and you extinguish that hostility with acts of kindness, it's a beautiful thing. Beautiful, beautiful. Closing prayer. Visible excellence. That's what I was talking about here. I'm sorry. That's what you said. This is what it looks like, right? This is what love looks like. It doesn't look like a Hallmark Valentine card. It looks like that crayon thing they did in kindergarten that you put on the refrigerator that you still have. Why? Because it was from the heart. This is for you, Mommy. This is for you, Granny. And I've got one in my truck that he made in second grade, a 2-year-old craft project. It's not Rembrandt, but he made it. And that's what excellence looks like. I asked that question earlier. Think that through. The best Christian you know, why do you think of them as the best Christian you know? And it may be that on your darkest day, they rang your doorbell. Maybe it was during something like divorce isn't real popular around church. You go, I was going through a divorce and the church could have shunned me, but they loved me. I was depressed because I had an abortion. And over here, there's people screaming that's murder. Somebody loved you in your broken condition. And somehow, all of the religious stuff that should have offended us, we just set that aside. There's a church in Odessa, and the women of the church, Odessa's got like an oil boom going on. What you don't know also is that they have some, trying to think of the right word, gentleman entertainment places in that town for those oil field workers. And the women of the First Baptist Church started taking care packages past the dance clubs to give to the women because they saw them as people rather than strippers. Wow. That's excellence, right? Don't we wish that was all normal? No, it's an example of excellence for a reason. Closing prayer looks like this. We'll pray that, but let me read it to you first. Dear God, your love is perfect, but mine is not. Can we admit that? And none of us got this right. I mess up religion and I mess up relationships. That's the confessional. Please empty me of my self-serving love so that your love can flow through me. We have to get out of the way. Okay? We have to take our blinders off. In my heart of hearts, when I look at poor, hungry, and homeless, I think people ought to help themselves. I work at my job every day. Why aren't you at yours? What's that? That's the selfish side of me. That's the judgmental side of me. Kindness side says they're probably mentally ill. They've probably been thrown out by their own families. They probably, truth, I wouldn't hire them if I was a boss. That's the side over here. Self-centered love versus just love flowing through me. Can you pray a prayer? If this shoe doesn't fit, pray your own prayer. All right? We're going to give a time of invitation. It's possible that you want to come kneel at one of these marvelous little kneeling spots over here just to in humility, pour yourself out before the Lord. What a beautiful, humble gesture. I'll be here just like Billy Graham saying, you come, the buses will wait. If you need some prayer on your heartache, someone wants to be delightfully saved, or make a public commitment of some kind, I'll be here to receive you as well. Let's pray. Dear God, your love is perfect, but mine is not. I mess up religion, and I mess up relationships. Please empty me of my self-serving love so that your love can flow through me. Amen and amen. I think today maybe our love took a bath and got some of the dirty grit washed off of it. Maybe. Maybe a kid's going to clean up his little brother's room. Maybe mama's going to make a German chocolate cake from scratch. Maybe God's at work in your life today.
Thanks for visiting. Find us at www.islandbaptistchurch.org.